Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. This is Life, Liberty, and Levin. We have two great guests. Congressman Mo Brooks. How are you, sir?
Doing fine. How about
Congressman
yourself
Matt
today?
Gates.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, fellas. Well, the other day, you had quite a little session on the floor of the House of Representatives. Every Democrat but two voted for what they call a resolution. And every Republican voted against it, and two Democrats joined you. And I want to get into this in a moment because I see a lot of propaganda here where a lot of the Democrats are saying we're doing exactly the same thing we did with Bill Clinton. Well, the funny thing is, I have both resolutions, and they're doing exactly the opposite. But before we get to that, I agree with the President. We got to talk a little bit about substance and the substance of this phone call. We have the phone call. I don't know what we need witnesses for. A witness, why? Can't we read English? Can't we reason? Can't we digest this stuff? So I need a whistleblower to tell me what I'm reading? I need a lieutenant colonel to tell me what I'm reading? No. So let's read one of the sentences that they say is the troubling sentence, all right? Now, this is deep into the conversation. In fact, it's near the end of the conversation, where the President says to the President of the Ukraine, the other thing, there's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of the people want to find out about that, so whatever you can do with the Attorney General would be great. Biden went around bragging that he stopped the prosecution, so if you can look into it, it sounds horrible to me. Is that not a public fact, Representative Gates, that Biden was bragging about the fact that he stopped the prosecution?
Of course. And we've learned over the course of these interviews that the Democrats' defense that, well, there were all these international organizations that also wanted the prosecutor gone, is bogus, because those international organizations were reacting to what was emanating from the United States, where Joe Biden specifically wanted to get rid of a prosecutor in exchange for aid, a quid pro quo. And by the way, oftentimes in American foreign policy, we demand things in exchange for aid. But what Joe Biden did was a little odd because it seemed to be directly related to investigations of his family and his son. And Mark, how in the hell is the United States of America supposed to pursue an anti-corruption agenda globally if the second family of the United States is running a pay-for-play scheme out of the Vice President's office?
Congressman Brooks, do you have a problem with what the President said here?
No, absolutely not. I think the President, and I would hope that every President, would try to ferret out corruption wherever it may exist. And in this particular instance, we have a video that the public can look at in which Joe Biden is on TV boasting about how he was withholding $1 billion of American taxpayers' money from the Ukraine, conditioned on Ukraine within 6 hours, firing the prosecutor who at the time was in charge of numerous corruption investigations, to include one of the employer of Joe Biden's son, who is being paid $50,000 a month for who knows what, if not influencing the United States government to perhaps do things we should not be doing. So I'm thankful that the President of the United States is trying to ferret out corruption wherever it may exist. And if you have the investigation that the President was asking for, there are two outcomes. One is the Biden family is cleared. Nothing unethical, nothing corrupt. Fine. That helps Joe Biden, doesn't hurt him. But the other outcome of an investigation is that there was corruption, there is that kind of evidence, there is a prosecution, and heaven help us if we're not going to try to prosecute corruption that may go all the way to the White House, which it would have if that's the finding with Joe Biden being Vice President of the United States.
One thing that surprised me was that almost every other Democratic presidential campaign rushed to Joe Biden's defense in the absence of any facts. And so I wonder, as Democrats ultimately select a nominee, and I don't think it will be Joe Biden, will they all come to deeply regret the fact that they just reflexively opposed Trump, supported Biden, despite the fact that Hunter Biden's bad activities were not defensible? And will Hunter Biden now no longer just be a smear on Joe Biden? Will he also be smearing the integrity of all of the other Democratic presidential candidates?
Here's what I see, and let me get your take on this. It's okay to have a special counsel appointed to investigate a president of the United States, even though that appointment violated Justice Department regulations. There was no criminal pretext. 2.5-year investigation, $40 million, It's as if it never happened. President of the United States clear. No allegation that they wanted to even bring an indictment. You know, they say, oh, well, there's 10 examples of obstruction. Well, why didn't you recommend an indictment, even if you couldn't bring one? Because there was no charge that could have been brought. We have a president of the United States who has been the subject of a subpoena campaign about his bank records, his tax returns, his businesses, his family, his communications with his accountant. You have a president of the United States who's been attacked on the emoluments clause. Nobody ever even heard of that clause before. Thrown out by a circuit court. He's under constant, relentless attack. Russia came to nothing. All of a sudden, this Ukraine thing happens. Now, look, I've been around long enough. You guys are on Congress. These things don't just happen. All of a sudden, Ukraine hits the table. Not Ukraine because Ukraine interfered in the 2016 election, according to Politico and the New York Times, to help Hillary Clinton and hurt Trump. That's a fact. But now Ukraine, any phone call. How did we get to this?
I believe that the Ukraine knockoff sequel to the Russia hoax is a direct consequence of the humiliation that Adam Schiff, a lot of folks on the left, and frankly, the mainstream media feel after peddling a lie for 2.5 years about this president. They set the bar so high. They said they had more than circumstantial evidence that Trump was acting at the behest of Russia. It was total nonsense. And so rather than doing what we should be doing, finding out why this corrupt investigation began into the president, Democrats and their allies in the mainstream media have tried to distract us with this just Ukraine nonsense. Look, we don't need hours and hours of testimony so that the American people can interpret what is clearly before us in the transcript of this call. The American people can read that call and can understand there is nothing illegal at all about it, that it is entirely appropriate for the president to be rooting out corruption. And where we have a Joe Biden problem, that is Joe Biden's fault, not President Trump's fault.
I'm also confused about this Joe Biden stuff. Are you immune from investigation because you decide you want to run for office and you might be the opponent of the President of the United States, and therefore the President of the United States talking to the President of another country shouldn't elicit, even suggest, you might want to look into something that's in the public realm? That's the President of the United States trying to get a foreign country to interfere in the election. You could turn that on the head of any politician running for office at any time another politician or another candidate says, or elected official, you know, you might want to look at this. It's in the public record. Oh, you're interfering with the election. You should be expelled. You should be impeached. You should be removed. Is that how it works?
It should not work that way. Let's be clear here about what the Democrat argument is. If you happen to be running for public office against someone that is doing an investigation of you or prompts an investigation of you, you have absolute immunity. That cannot be sound public policy, yet that is exactly what the Democrats are arguing for, that because Joe Biden happens to be a Democrat candidate for the presidency, by the way, one that I don't think has much of a prayer given the makeup of the Democrat primary, but putting that aside for a moment, given that situation, he is not entitled to immunity from his prior remarks about his having held $1 billion in aid to Ukraine as hostage in order to stop or interfere with an investigation of a company that is paying his son $50,000 a month. To me, American taxpayers have a right to know whether Hunter Biden was really earning that money or if the purpose of that $50,000 per month payment was to influence American foreign policy through his dad, who happened to be vice president.